just like ignore them, you don't go see them, and you leave them in homes, and you have nothing to do with them after that.
Maybe it's the opposite, like it might be like you're abusing them because they are old and like say they get pensions and stuff, so like instead of like ignoring them, you kind of take advantage of them and take advantage of their money.
Maybe keeping them at home, like they could be getting on your nerves or whatever, and there could be too much tension there, whereas they'd probably be better off in a home, and you can go visit them, and that way there's not so much hostility between the two of you.
There's physical or mental abuse towards them, like if you verbally abuse the elders, calling them stupid or dumb, or physically hitting them.
The issue of abuse, spousal abuse and child abuse, has been covered in the media. We all are aware that those two issues are being dealt with in our society. However, there's another kind of domestic violence which is becoming evident, and that is elder abuse. Can you tell me what you think elder abuse might be?
It's like when you just like ignore them, you don't go see them.
Okay.
The elders, calling them stupid or dumb, or physically hitting them.
Exactly. Are there any other kinds of abuse that you can think of?
Well, maybe you kind of take advantage of them and take advantage of their money or whatnot.
Can you think of another word that describes that kind of abuse?
It's financial.
I would like you to watch this video and ask yourself the question while you're watching it, why is this video pertinent to me? And as you watch it, try to just think about how Norman got to be where he is right now. And before we watch the video, I would like to introduce Selina Robinson. Selina's going to join us to discuss the issues after we watch the video.
As a representative of the Generation Connection Society that is involved in bringing together the generations, we feel that elder abuse is an issue that faces all of us, and that by increasing our awareness and our understanding of this problem, that we can then do something about it.
Sometimes I sit and I think, and I say to myself, why does it happen to me? Or what's the reason? There shouldn't be no reason.
Norman is 77 years old. He lives with his wife and two sons, aged 46 and 47. Both of his sons are unemployed and show little interest in finding a job. They have always lived with their parents and are dependent on Norman's income from his Social Security and pension checks. We first taped Norman in a police station a few weeks after he had been severely beaten by one of his sons. This beating was not the first. There had been other beatings going back over a period of 5 years.
So the first thing I knew, I got cracked. I got a black eye. He knocked me on the floor. I could have signed a complaint then. But the thing was, if I signed a complaint, I was afraid that when I go home, they're going to beat me up. That's why I never signed it, because I figured once I get in the house, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I know they'd work me over, believe me, and I don't want that no more. I'm tired of that. I had 3 ribs broke.
That's when I first met Norman,
Right.
in the emergency room at the hospital.
Right.
He was brought in there because he used his son Fred's towel by mistake. Fred happened to be walking by and saw his dad using his towel to dry himself, and he came in there and he took his head and slammed it into the bowl.
Yeah.
And he had to have stitches to close his head up. He was just battered. But since that, he's been out of the house a few times.
Yeah,
and
a
been
few
placed
times.
in shelters, and we placed him in a couple other places. But he'll run into family members and they convince him to come back home.
I always think it's going to get better, but it only lasts so long.
They take his money, and Norman has to work a few hours a week just to get spending money for himself.
I don't want to run over here all the time and tell them that I got beat up. I should never get beat up, to be honest with you. I shouldn't run.
After this last beating, Norman decided that he would, in fact, press charges. In the past, Norman would leave home after a beating, but would eventually come back. This time, he said, it would be different.
If I go back, it'll last so long. And then something will happen again. And maybe they'll kill me one of these days.
With the help of the police department, a court date had been set. But at the very last minute, Norman decided to drop the charges and, in fact, move back in with his wife and sons. A few months later, I met and talked with Norman again.
And I says, I want the case dismissed.
You had told the judge that?
Yes. And don't press charges against the sons.
Why did you decide not to press charges?
I don't want to see him put away, to be honest with you. I never been in jail myself, and they've never been, and I don't know, maybe I'm chicken-hearted or whatever you call it. I just couldn't see it.
If it happens again, are you willing to go that step?
Yes, I am, yes. They'll have to learn sooner or later.
Why did you decide to go back after you had left the first couple of times?
Well, I haven't got any friends, relations or anything, and it's not very easy to answer, you know. I'm 77, or I will be in a few weeks, and actually, where can you go when you haven't got no friends? You can't walk the streets.
What about the senior center? Remember I was telling you,
Yeah.
Have you made any contacts
I
there?
haven't made any contact. I will, though, and as soon as the weather gets a little bit better. But the thing is, sometimes they go out, and I got to sit in by myself till they come home.
Why do you have to stay in?
I
if
don't
they go
know
out?
why. I guess they're always afraid that somebody's going to get in the house.
So if they're out, you have to stay in,
Stay in, yeah.
whether you want to or not?
Right.
I guess I'm wondering what kind of feelings you have about your sons. I mean, is there some anger there about what they've done?
No, it's no anger. I don't hold grudges, you know. I mean, I felt bad at the time, but I'm the type of person that I don't hold grudges against anybody. I mean, that's the way I was brought up. And it's a shame that things like that really happen, you know.
So you don't feel any differently about your sons at this
No.
Did you have a close relationship with your boys?
Yes, I did. Very, very much. Even when they were little, the youngest one, when I come home from work, he'd be running down the street and he'd jump in my arms and I'd kiss him and hold him. And the oldest one, well, we got along real good, but the youngest one, I think, cared more for me than the oldest boy.
If you had another option to living with your family, because of the fact that you're still a little afraid that this might happen again, would you choose that option? Or would you just kind of take the chance of staying and living with your family?
Staying living with my family, yeah.
You would do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
You think about it a lot of times. It's not an easy question to answer. I don't like to go. I'd rather stay with them.
Yeah.
The day I pass away.
Shortly after this tape was finished, Norman was again beaten by one of his sons and spent 3 days in the hospital. 2 months later, Norman left his family and tried living in a single-room hotel for older adults. He stayed away one night and then decided to go back to live with his family. Norman has been encouraged to get out and socialize at a local senior center. He has also been encouraged to meet with a counselor to help him explore what options and services are available to him. But Norman is getting more frail, and it is harder for him to get around. Moreover, his family, possibly concerned that he will try to leave again, rarely lets him go anywhere by himself.
Watching this video, what did it make you think of?
Like you kind of hope that, this would not happen to yourself. Like you're thinking, you have a family and you have these dreams that your children are going to be great and you're going to have the perfect family, and then in your old age when you're so frail, they kind of turn on you. You just hope it doesn't happen to yourself, to anyone you know.
It made me wonder what the kids had, like what reason they had to beat him.
Like, we don't know Norman's background. Like, you know, when his kids were younger, he might have abused them.
And I think that Norman was just the easy target, you know, to take their anger out on him because he wouldn't fight back.
I think that's a really interesting point that you just made, that how come Norman isn't fighting back? I mean, how come he's just a victim?
I think he's not fighting back because he has nowhere else to go.
So he's isolated and that?
Yeah, he has no one else to turn to, so he has to put up with that abuse even though he knows it's wrong. I think they're majorly taking advantage of their parents. I mean,
Yeah, and it said that they're making no effort to get a job. Well, so they were just living off his pension money and living off him.
So how did Norman let his kids take such advantage of him?
Personally, I think maybe it was like he was a little too unassertive, because like, I mean, if you think about it, his children are like 40, right? I mean, that's kind of...
yeah.
Can you pick out some other characteristics of Norman that were very evident in the video we saw?
Generous. He seemed very generous and kind, gentle.
Norman was actually a forgiving man because every time something happened to him, he'd always forgive. And he'd think that maybe one day it'll be better, but then in reality it wasn't.
I think he was too forgiving. I mean, he could be nice, but his sons, they'll probably never learn because they'll always take advantage of him.
Well, it seemed Norman was afraid also to go out and face the world, and he was afraid to, you know, go get help. And like, he would rather take the beating and have the security of his house than rather go out and seek help, you know?
I think you're exactly right, and can we just take that a little bit further? Can you think of another word that describes that kind of behavior?
Insecure? Well,
Certainly there's an insecurity there, but he's also very...
passive.
I think he's really lonely because of what happens to him. He distances himself from society. Like, he's in a household of 3 of his family, but he has no friends and nothing to do. He's just by himself. He's like totally lonely.
Mm-hmm. And it seems almost like he was generous with his kids to a point, and all of a sudden they just turned and were abusive, and then there was no turning back.
You can't just keep on giving them money. You have to have a certain time where you say stop, you know?
So what is it about Norman that isn't allowing him to say stop, no more?
He never expected his own family to do this to him, so he was just being nice, giving his money or whatever. But then he didn't realize until maybe the abuse started that, oh, maybe I did too much. But then they just took advantage of the situation. Now they turn on him, and now he's too weak to actually do something about it. Or,
in what ways is he weak?
Well, I think maybe emotional. Like, he doesn't want to hurt them. Like, still, like they're still his kids, and he doesn't want to see his kids in jail because he'll put all the blame on himself, which would make the situation worse.
Like that, he doesn't have any friends. He's lonely, but how can you not be lonely if you don't go out? Sure, it's his sons are abusing him, and so they seem to have more power than him.
Could the fact that he's so isolated be a part of the abuse, that his sons keep him isolated?
Control.
Yeah.
Control? Right. So somehow, somewhere along the way, Norman has lost his power, and his sons now have all the power.
Right.
Just kind of like bring it back to that point where it is kind of an embarrassing situation to be in, where your kids are beating you up. Like, that's hard to talk about. Like, I mean, he's obviously done that. He's talking now out loud, but I mean, it's hard to talk about, though.
So there's a certain level of shame with being abused by your children.
That's
and so
right.
Elderly people might not want to talk about it.
So like, let's just go home and pretend it never happened, kind of thing. But it just happens again.
At the beginning of the discussion, we mentioned the types of abuse that we were aware of. Can you think of the types of abuse that Norman experienced? Can you put a label on them?
I think they're all, like, he's being abused by all of them. Like, his financial, they're taking all his money from his pension. They're beating him physically, and mentally he's just like lonely and kind of dead almost. And psychologically he's just hurting. I think it's all of it.
Exactly. How might you recognize some other signs of elderly abuse?
Like they won't talk to anybody because they've forgotten how to communicate, and their self-esteem has dropped. So they're just almost living in their own little world, and they don't think anybody wants to associate with them anymore.
And I guess what concerns me is that it makes it very difficult for us to see it because they keep themselves hidden.
The reason why that could be is because they're afraid that if they do open up, they'll be rejected again, and they'll be more hurt than before, right? So they'll just stay in there and just protect themselves, the only way they know how to.
And I think you're absolutely right.
I know this one lady, and the way I think that she could be abused is she always says, I wish I could kill myself. No one lives with me. My daughter, she's moved now. She doesn't ever call me. In that way, she's been cut off by her family. She's by herself.
So being ignored?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's easy to neglect someone. You have to kind of put out an effort if you want to, include them in stuff.
So it takes work to involve elders in our lives. It takes effort on our part?
Yes, true.
So is it then our responsibility to do something about elder abuse, or is it the elder's responsibility?
Ours.
Everyone.
Yeah. It's everyone's responsibility.
It's probably not even just like elderly abuse. I mean, it's like parental abuse, right? I mean, it's when we're getting in this kind of rebellious stage, they're still like kind of able to put their foot down, but they don't, because they think, oh, well, it's just a phase, it passes over. And then it does pass over. But then some people, like that power, or whatever they call it as power, is all they have to hang on to. And then like they kind of start abusing it that way, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
So what you're saying is that it actually starts a lot earlier than when they're old. The pattern has been established early in life. I think that's a very good point. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the abuser. What do you think is going on for the abuser? What do you think their experience is in all this?
I think the abuser, like, maybe he just or he or she just feels like there's no sense of self-accomplishment. Okay, I know I'm kind of bringing it back to the victim again, but then like maybe like the parent didn't always say, well, hey, it feels good to do a good job at something.
So they're probably feeling really lousy about themselves because they haven't gotten anywhere in their life? Is that?
Well, maybe they don't even know it exists,
Right.
Maybe the abuser has so much emotions that built up inside to the extent that they don't know any way to get rid of it, but take it out on somebody that's close to them.
I think they're hurting a lot inside too, because a lot of times, like you can relate it to small situations in your own life. A lot of times you'll blow up and you'll look like the bad guy, but you're hurting inside. That's why you're doing it. You're lashing out because you're hurt. So a lot of the abusers are very sick, I think.
Maybe the abuser, they don't have the power. They don't feel the confidence and the responsibility in themselves, so they try to get the power.
When you're young, your parents are the power figures, and like they're up there, and so to be able to actually overpower them, you must like make you feel, oh, I'm great. Like I have more power over my parents. I can tell them what to do. And that like, if you don't have power when you're younger, that feeling must be great for an abuser, I guess. Like to actually be able to have the power of their parents.
And I guess that'd be the same reason for child abuse as well, because when you're a child, your parents have control over you. So you say, when I have kids, I can have that kind of control as well. So really, it's a control issue. Who has control over, if you can have control over someone else's life?
It's maybe not so much control, because sometimes you do it unconsciously, I mean, when you really have a bad temper, it's like the second you're mad, you can't see straight, right? It's like, well, oh, because I'm right because I'm mad. Maybe you're doing it so unconsciously that it happens because when you were being brought up, like they did it to you unconsciously too? So
It would be the same thing, although except you're not thinking about it, it just happens.
Right, and then it turns out to be, child abuse leading to parental abuse, and that cycle over again.
And there's nothing to break the cycle unless there's one person who really understands it.
Good point.
Can any of you picture yourself as a potential victim or a potential abuser? Could you see yourself ever playing one of those roles?
No, because me and my parents are very close, so I can never see myself in that position.
You're close, and what else is happening in your family?
We're straight open. Like every time we have dinner, we always talk or discuss about things. So whatever goes on, we're always aware of it.
I was just thinking that if we have education like this, I don't think I could see myself as a potential abuser.
What about as potential victim?
A victim.
I mean, if everyone.
Well, actually, if we know, like, okay, if we know ourselves that we're not going to do it to our parents, then I think we'd teach our children the right way, and I don't think they would abuse us.
I think that we don't know what's going to happen to us, like whether it's going to happen to us. I mean, we could be so close to our parents now, and then when we get older, or when they get older, and then they start getting on your nerves, just what they do, and then you perceive things differently, and because nobody wants it to happen to them, and then you just think, oh, it'll never happen to me. You can't say that.
That's a really good point. If we look back over the discussion that we've had over the past couple of hours, can you tell me some of the issues that came up today, what you learned from the discussion this afternoon?
When you first asked the question, what is elder abuse? It was just blank. I didn't know.
And I learned that it destroys families too.
Actually, like I didn't realize before that really happened, like what happened with Norman.
If a problem could arise, then I could solve it. Like, most people don't realize that they have a problem among their family. Like they just think it just happens naturally. So if you realize that you have a problem, then you can probably get help to solve it.
So your awareness now is increased so that if a problem did arise, you'd be able to give it a label.
Yes.
And that'll stop a lot of problems there.
Good. A little earlier on, someone talked about that we can't see into the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if we're going to become abusers or victims. So what can we do if we don't know? What can we do for ourselves to make sure that doesn't happen?
We should be more aware of elder abuse. I don't know, there's not enough information out there. Like we've heard of child abuse and wife battering and all that, but I never thought that elder abuse was so serious. After I saw that video, I actually realized it is so serious about how children can actually do that.
Like, yeah, we should start right now educating the people, or else it'll go on and become worse.
Any ideas what we can do right now?
Help people understand.
And to have respect for other people.
You should make it a part of like the guidance program, maybe a chapter on, elderly abuse, because we talk about child abuse and, we talk about all other sorts of things.
So in some respects, the schools need to be responsible for educating young people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have any ideas of who else needs to be responsible to make sure all this information gets out there?
I think media is going to be a big part of it.
Probably the government. They could set up some sort of programs or something to help out.
I think we shouldn't just start with educating people our age, because then we're kind of forgetting about what's happening to people right now. It's just kind of like brushing them off. I think we should start like putting things like this on TV and showing the people who are being abused what they're doing that could possibly be encouraging it.
I think there should be education there too, because a lot of those people are thinking, I'm the only person this is happening to.
Mm-hmm.
It's never happened to anybody else. So at least if they know it's happening to other people, that might make it easier for them to come out.
Might take the shame away.
Mm-hmm. Now that we've had this discussion, maybe by educating us, and if we go tell people, and it gets spread around, and we can make a difference.